everyone, and welcome to AWS Julie. For today's video, we're continuing with our new series on needed AWS fundamentals to ensure you pass your AWS certification exams. For this lesson, I want to do a high-level overview of Amazon Route 53. We will be diving deeper into Route 53 and DNS in later lessons, but for this fundamental series, I wanted to first add fundamentals for the core services in AWS. In the last lesson, we covered fundamentals of DNS, so check out that video if you missed it. But in that last lesson, covering the fundamentals of DNS, at the beginning of that lesson, we briefly mentioned the two main functions of Amazon Route 53, registering domains and hosting zones. Amazon Route 53 is a DNS as a service. Let me know if y'all want a lesson on how to register a domain, but at a high-level overview, you create a domain name, and you start off with a Start of Authority record, and this SOA record stores the name of the server that supplied the data for the zone, the administrator of the zone, the current version of the data file, and the default number of seconds for the time to live, or TTL file, on the resource records. The TTL is the length that a DNS record is cached on either a resolving server or your own personal computer. For SOA, there are different types of records, and for your exam, it is also important to understand the different types of records that DNS has, and we will talk about those in just a few minutes. But let's dive into Amazon Route 53. The first function of Amazon Route 53 is to register domains. Amazon Route 53 can do this because Route 53 has a relationship with all of the major domain registries. And remember, those are .com, .edu, .uk, .org, and more. Route 53 has received this authority from IANA, who manages the root zone for DNS. So when you register a domain, Route 53 will check with the registry to see if that domain is available. If it is, then Route 53 creates a zone file for that domain along with the allocating name servers for the zone. A zone file is a database that contains the DNS information for a domain. The name servers that Route 53 creates, it also manages these name servers, which are distributed globally. There are usually 4 name servers for one individual zone. Route 53 takes the zone file it creates, which is known as a hosted zone, and puts the zone file onto the 4 managed name servers. Then it adds the name server records into the zone file for the .com top-level domain, and the name server records are how the organization VeriSign delegates the administration of the domain tools. And by adding the 4 name servers to the .com domain, that makes the 4 name servers created in Route 53 authoritative for the domain. So when we register a domain, we create a zone file, create a number of managed servers, put the zone file on the name servers just created, and reach out to the registry for the top-level domain and get the name server records added to the top-level domain zone to then point back at the name servers created in Route 53. The second function is that Amazon Route 53 provides DNS zones and also hosting for those DNS zones. Route 53 can host zone files for you on managed name servers that it provides. The hosted zone reaches back out to the top-level domain. For example, if I'm creating a hosted zone for awsjulie.com, these name server records are added into the zone file for the .com top-level domain. Let's pause for a fundamental question. What type of service is Route 53? Global or regional resilience? Route 53 is a global service with a single database. The data that Route 53 stores is distributed globally as a single set and replicated between regions, so it can tolerate the failure of one or more regions. For hosted zones, Route 53, remember, lets you create a managed zone file. And these zone files are called the hosted zones because they are hosted on AWS managed name servers. When you create a hosted zone, a number of servers are allocated and linked to that hosted zone. Each hosted zone in Route 53 has a number of allocated managed name servers. Hosted zones can be public, so the data is accessible on the internet, and the name servers for the publicly hosted zones live in the AWS public zone. Public hosted zones are part of the public DNS system. A hosted zone can also be private and linked to one or more Amazon VPCs. Why would you need a private hosted zone? Well, you might need to host sensitive DNS records. Hosted zones host our DNS records and record sets. And remember, I mentioned different DNS records earlier. So examples might be an A record, an alias record, a CNAME record, and more. But let's start with name server records. These records are used to delegate in DNS to point at servers managed by, for example, Amazon.com. So remember, we have the .com zone, and this zone has multiple name server records. The servers inside Amazon.com zone are DNS records such as www, and remember the root zone has name servers that delegate and point to the servers that host the .com zone. An A or an AAAA record stands for address. The A record is used to translate the name of the domain to an IP address, so they map host zones to IP addresses. An A record maps to an IP version 4 address, and an AAAA record maps to an IP version 6 address. A CNAME record can be used to resolve one domain name to another. For example, you have www.mobile.amazon.com and also www.amazon.com. Both will resolve to the same IP address. So we are mapping the one domain name to the other. These are host-to-host records. CNAME records cannot point to other IP addresses, just other names. Alias records are used to map resources to record sets in your hosted zone. For example, to an Elastic Load Balancer, to CloudFront, an S3 static website, and so on. You can map one DNS name, like www.amazon.com, to another target DNS name, such as your Elastic Load Balancer. For Elastic Load Balancers, you resolve them using a DNS name because Elastic Load Balancers do not have predefined IP version 4 addresses. Also, you cannot map a CNAME to a naked domain. It has to have the www, which is the host, in front of the domain. For your exam, understand the differences between alias and CNAME records. MX records are used for email to help the server know which server to pass the email along to. TXT records or text records allow you to add text to a domain and can help to prove the ownership of the domain. And that's all I want to cover for this lesson. And remember, we will be diving deeper into Route 53 and DNS throughout this series. If you found this content useful, a like and a subscribe would mean a lot to me. It really helps me know what y'all like, and it gives me an indicator that I'm building useful content. Now in the next lesson, we'll cover another AWS core service, and that is Amazon RDS. Thanks so much for watching.